The title of this morning's discussion is Humility. And today's reading in Luke chapter 18, verse 9 through 14, it was interesting. When I was led to this passage and I read it, I realized this is one of the few passages, and I think the only parable I've never preached on before. Not intentional. And so there was a part of me that was kind of excited to delve into this. And so before we get into the scripture, I just wanted to kind of share a few thoughts and things that I was reflecting on. There's an expression: comparison is the thief of joy. And we live in a society where everything, we're always comparing ourselves one to another. Comparing what we have better than someone else and how someone else has things better than us. And it's pretty tricky because we live in a society with between social media and now today AI, what is real and what's not real. There's a lot of folks who really enjoy putting on a show. This upcoming, I believe, Friday is Halloween, where, of course, people dress up and pretend to be someone they are not. And I'm not going to make go into any commentaries in terms of the celebration of Halloween, whether it's a good thing or not. I don't get too hung up on it myself. But the point of Halloween and costumes and everything else typically are people just dressing up and kind of having fun. When I was reflecting on that, I remember my nephew, Kyle, who, of course, is now a grown man with his own children, which, when I think about, makes me feel old. But I remember when he was little, and I was over visiting his house. I don't remember the occasion. I think I was just swinging through to say hello, and my sister Elaine was like, "Oh, Kyle, show Uncle James your Batman costume," and he had to go into another room to put on his Batman costume, so that I didn't see who Batman really was, because it was going to be real tough for me to figure out. And he came out and he was in his Batman costume and he was trying to look all Batman-like. And when he took the costume off, again, I couldn't, I wasn't allowed to see him take the costume off because it's a secret who Batman really is. But he was playing a role, having some fun. The unfortunate thing is that there's a lot of adults who are walking around kind of doing the same thing, playing a role, pretending to be something that they're not. And there was, I was listening to someone speak. I'm drawing a blank on who it was. That's the problem. I think I probably listened to so many podcasts and different speakers, I sometimes don't remember who I hear say what. But they were pointing out, they said, who, statistically speaking, who do we lie to the most? Do we lie to our children the most, our parents, our co-workers? And he kind of went through this whole thing, and he said that he believed the individual we lie to the most is ourselves. And I thought he had a very, very important point. And so rarely do we look at ourselves honestly. And the unfortunate thing is that a lot of people, and especially and again, I'm going to circle back to social media. It's, I don't know if anyone ever watches like YouTube videos and stuff like that, but if you go into the comments section where people comment on the videos or whatever is going on, and they kind of give their, you have a lot of keyboard warriors who in their basements, when they can anonymously type, are pretty darn tough. And it's amazing. It never ceases to surprise me that people will attack each other over anything. And the best I can figure the reason why people do that is they do it very often to feel better about themselves. Because it's nothing like tearing someone down to feel better about yourself. And when we do that, it is a very dangerous road to go down. Because, and there's an expression I like to use, I believe it is very important that in life, that in all things we act humbly, because if we don't, sooner or later, we will be humbled. And so if you would, please join me for Luke chapter 18, verse 9 through 14. And this is a parable that Jesus is teaching about a Pharisee and a tax collector. And I've talked before about parables and that they are a wonderful, wonderful teaching tool. And what I find amazing about Jesus's parables is if you look at the context of the time in which they were originally spoken, they have so much more power and meaning, yet at the same time, even today, still very relevant. So don't let anyone tell you Scripture's not relevant anymore. It 100% is. Because let me tell you, technology changes, culture changes, but people don't. So, in Luke chapter 18, verse 9, to some who were confident of their own righteousness and looking down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. And we have, if you look around the world today, we got a lot of folks like that, don't we? Who kind of think they know better than everyone else and believe themselves to be better than everyone else. And really, these individuals had such confidence in their own righteousness, which is very foolish. The only thing that we should ever have any confidence in is God's righteousness. Period. I mean, there are certain things we can have a reasonable amount of confidence in, that when we leave this building, we'll go out and we go to start our vehicles, there's a better than average chance they'll start, and we can have a certain amount of confidence in them. But we all know that we could walk out of this building, go into that parking lot, and even though that vehicle has started up 1,000 times for you in the past, you could turn the key, or actually these days, push the button, and it could just go click, and that's it. There's nothing absolutely in the world and in ourselves that we know 100% we can rest our elbows on except God's righteousness. And to believe anything else is foolish. It's also important, I believe, that we check ourselves. And we need to make sure we always do spiritual checkups. And what I mean by that is you go to a doctor for regular checkups, or a dentist for regular checkups, or whatever, for a reason. Because you can go through life and not pay attention, and it turns out that there's something wrong and you're unaware of it. And so we do checkups, we monitor. You go to the doctor's office, they check your blood pressure, maybe you get some blood tests, they take a look at your numbers, so on and so forth. They make sure everything is as it should be. Go to the dentist, they have you open your mouth, and one of the first things they do, they ask you, has anything been bothering you? Then they start poking around, and they move your face in all kinds of weird positions and everything else. I don't know about all of you, but when I leave the dentist, my face hurts. Get my face moving in all kinds of directions that it just is not normal. But they're looking all around, they're checking up, because things can be wrong and we're not aware of it. And so I have to ask the question, spiritually, are we doing the same thing? Are we going to God and asking for a spiritual checkup? Hey, God, what do I need to fix? Is everything okay? We take our cars in for a tune-up. Are we doing that with our spirits? Going to God and saying, hey, Lord, check me out. Make sure there's nothing that I don't really need to address. And if you do, chances are, got news for you, there will be, and you'll have some work to do. But that's a discussion for another time. And so Jesus, seeing these individuals who were acting this way, taught with a parable. Starting off in verse 10, 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. Now, Jesus intentionally used the Pharisee and tax collector for very specific reasons. The Pharisee, of course, was supposed to be the expert in the law and is a leader in the community and a well-respected individual, and knew the Jewish law, the Hebrew law, the Moses law, so on and so forth, everything else. He's supposed to be the expert and the good guy in the context of that time. The tax collector, on the other hand, was someone who was very much looked down upon in society. Tax collectors had a very bad reputation at that time. And in many instances, well-deserved bad reputation, because the thing to remember about the tax collectors was that the tax collectors were not like those individuals who work for the IRS today. I'm not going to be critical of tax collectors today. I might be critical of the taxes, but the tax collectors, I'm not going to go there, because they are individuals who are punching a time clock and doing a job. But the tax collectors at that time in this region, well, they were, to say that most of them were crooked and corrupt was an understatement. See, they collected taxes for the government, yet at the same time, they collected extra for themselves. And they basically would extort people and take full advantage of people, and tax collectors were just, not very liked and had a bad reputation. And there's a lot of information out there that can give a lot more context to the significance of the tax collector if you feel the need to go delve into that deeper. And so there you have the tax collector, who everyone at that time would have been boo, hiss, and the Pharisee, who, let's just say, who would be walking around with their nose kind of maybe slightly angled up, if you know what I mean. And so the Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. So what's the first thing he does is he compares himself to others, and he basically feels pretty good about himself. Like, you know what, Lord? And it's funny because what does he say to God? He's not saying, Lord, help me be better. Instead, he's saying, Lord, thank you for making me so good. It's like, whoa, man alive, is that arrogant or what? And then in the process, he exalts himself by putting other people down. Do we see that a little bit today? I think it's very much. I think it's. I want to say the term is the how aboutism. Whenever you say, well, yeah, but how about this, that, and the other? Because one of the things that when we put other people down and we say, oh, well, you know what, I'm better than robbers, evildoers, adulterers, and even that tax collector, what is it that we're doing when we do that? If we say, well, you know what, at least I'm in church today, at least I pray, at least I don't do this, and at least I don't do that. I mean, yeah, I might do a little bit of this and that over here, but I'm not doing that. What are we doing? We're using the behaviors of others to justify our own. And that is something that I think as humans, many of us are guilty of. Because it's very easy to and I'll use driving for an example. It's very easy to say, yeah, I might be going a little bit over the speed limit, but I'm not like that maniac driving down the road. Well, what are we doing? We're justifying the fact that we're speeding, that we're going too fast. When you say, well, at the stop sign, I didn't come to a complete stop, but I see people run this sign all the time. At least I'm not doing that. So we're using other people's bad behavior to justify our own. And so instead of the Pharisee taking a look at himself, an honest look at himself, who he is, instead he is saying, look how good I am compared to these other individuals. And there's a lot of problems with that because, and again, there's the whole thing of we can use that to justify bad behavior, but another part of that is we're not trying to get better. Because he goes on from there, and after the comparison, he says, I fast twice a week and I give 1/10 of all that I get. Then he starts giving the list of all the good things about himself. So let me ask you a question, and this is a rhetorical one. If you have, let's say, let's go football, because I see some football jerseys out there. It's the season, so we'll do football. If you got someone who's a really good football player, and he takes this approach to his craft, of playing football and says, oh, well, I throw, I run, I do this and that so much better than other people, and look at everything that I'm good at, and he never takes the time to evaluate what could be improved, what's eventually going to happen to him. He's not going to make improvements. He's probably going to backslide a little bit, and other people are going to do better than him, and eventually he's going to find himself on the bench or off the team, right? Fairly reasonable. The only way that the athlete continues to win games and continues to make improvements is through self-evaluations. That's why the coach is there. That's why they have trainers. That's why, because they're constantly looking at everything that they're doing. There's professional swimmers. I remember reading an article about this Olympic swimmer, and they were explaining in the article that in the swimming pools there's sensors that senses every movement of their stroke, and they analyze it, and they'll make micro adjustments to how they swim to get them a fraction of a second better. I, on the other hand, I'm just glad that I can still breathe when I get to the other end of the pool. But even at that high level of athleticism, there is a striving to become better. And the only way to get better is through personal reflection and evaluation. And you can't do that if you don't have humility. So what's happening to that Pharisee in terms of his spiritual walk? Not a darn thing. He's got a lot of trouble. He's got a lot of problems. That's eventually going to catch up to him. Now, on the flip side, in verse 13, but the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Now, here's what I think is interesting is notice what he did and what he didn't do. Did he compare himself to anyone? He didn't say, God, make me more like that person. He didn't compare. He's not standing before God comparing himself to others. He's standing before God in truth of who he is. And this is very important because humility is not lowering yourself under others. And I feel obligated to make this point about this, that at no point in time did the tax collector compare himself to others. He didn't put himself down in terms of society. He didn't say, oh, I'm the worst of everyone. He didn't beat himself up about that. His focus was his relationship with God. And going before God in truth. That, I believe, is humility. An honest self-evaluation. Recognizing, God, you're God. I'm a flawed human being, and I need your grace. Not thinking any more or less of yourself. And I think that is the crux of what we as believers need to focus on. And in today's society is so difficult because, again, we've got those two extremes. We can go on social media and everyone on there looks like not everyone, there's some real train wrecks on social media. But there are so many people on social media. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, and I'm not all hip on everything going on and how that whole industry works, and you can tell how in tune I am just by the mere fact that I use the word hip. I'm sure that is quite dated. But when I found out that you can actually rent private jets by the hour for photographs, that there's people that actually will rent a sports car to do selfies. This is what I heard. This is what I was told. And as crazy as this world is, it's kind of like, all right, it actually kind of makes sense. That people, and you think about, and we all do this. Let's be honest. We all do this to a certain extent. You go on vacation, you got your device, you take 150 pictures and you post 45 of the best ones. So everyone who didn't go on the vacation with you sees the best 45 pictures of the 150 that you took, and you didn't even take a picture of everything because there were some things that you were like, oh, I don't even want to record that. And so when you see these things, you see the best of, and then you compare yourself to others, which goes back to my opening statement. Comparison is the thief of joy. But the tax collector didn't do that. The tax collector wasn't looking at the Pharisee. The Pharisee looked at the tax collector. The Pharisee brought the tax collector up and said, look how much better I am than him. But the Pharisee just dealt directly with God and said, Lord, have mercy on me. I'm a sinner. He went to God in truth. He wasn't lying about himself, about who he was, about his faults. At the same time, he wasn't comparing himself with others. And I believe that that is how we progress in our spiritual walk. The other thing is that the Pharisee made no requests of God. He said, God, thank you for making me so good. The tax collector said, Lord, make me better. And are we doing that? And not beating ourselves up. I'm not talking about putting yourself down. Please understand that. But what I am talking about is we need to go to God in truth. Constantly striving to be better. It should be our goal spiritually each and every day to be more today than we were yesterday and less than we will be tomorrow. We need to go to God and ask for help. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. It's only when we approach God in truth and humility can He work in us. If you want God to make improvements in your life, go to God in truth. Not putting on a show, but in honesty. And so I've kind of put down And this is, I thought about in my own words, and this is what I put together. What is humility? And when I say what is humility, I mean in the spiritual sense. It's approaching God in truth, humble about who we are, acknowledge God for who He is, and ask for help. And so in Jesus' parable, he had the Pharisee and the tax collector. The one who society would look at it as the good guy, and the one in society who would be typically looked at as the bad guy. And Jesus just flipped it on its ear. Because it wasn't about who was the better person in society. It was about their relationship with God. And so my hope and prayer for each and every one of us, that we will continue to grow through spiritual humility. Amen.